Well, I am sure it is quite transformed since last week. If I remember rightly, it had another entrance, and the courtyard was paved and empty, while today we have a splendid lawn, bordered by trees which appear to be 100 years old. Why not? I am fond of grass and shade, said Monte Cristo. Yes, said Madame de Villefort, the door was towards the road before, and on the day of my miraculous escape you brought me into the house from the road, I remember. Yes, madam, said Monte Cristo, but I preferred having an entrance which would allow me to see the Bois de Boulogne over my gate. In 4 days, said Morel, it is extraordinary. Indeed, said Chateau Renaud, it seems quite miraculous to make a new house out of an old one, for it was very old, and dull too. I recollect coming for my mother to look at it when M. de Saint Méran advertised it for sale 2 or 3 years ago. M. de Saint Méran? Said Madame de Villefort, then this house belonged to M. de Saint Méran before you bought it? It appears so, replied Monte Cristo. Is it possible that you do not know of whom you purchased it? Quite so, my steward transacts all this business for me. It is certainly 10 years since the house had been occupied, said Chateau Renaud, and it was quite melancholy to look at it, with the blinds closed, the doors locked, and the weeds in the court. Really, if the house had not belonged to the father-in-law of the procureur, one might have thought it some accursed place where a horrible crime had been committed. Villefort, who had hitherto not tasted the 3 or 4 glasses of rare wine which were placed before him, here took one, and drank it off. Monte Cristo allowed a short time to elapse, and then said, "It is singular, Baron, but the same idea came across me the first time I came here. It looks so gloomy I should never have bought it if my steward had not taken the matter into his own hands." Perhaps the fellow had been bribed by the notary. It is probable, stammered out Villefort, trying to smile, but I can assure you that I had nothing to do with any such proceeding. This house is part of Valentine's marriage portion, and M. de Saint Méran wished to sell it, for if it had remained another year or 2 uninhabited it would have fallen to ruin. It was Morel's turn to become pale. There was, above all, one room, continued Monte Cristo, very plain in appearance, hung with red damask, which, I know not why, appeared to me quite dramatic. Why so? Said Danglars. Why dramatic? Can we account for instinct? Said Monte Cristo. Are there not some places where we seem to breathe sadness? Why, we cannot tell. It is a chain of recollections, an idea which carries you back to other times, to other places, which, very likely, have no connection with the present time and place. And there is something in this room which reminds me forcibly of the chamber of the Marquise de Ganges, or Desdemona. Stay, since we have finished dinner, I will show it to you, and then we will take coffee in the garden. After dinner, the play. Monte Cristo looked inquiringly at his guests. Madame de Villefort rose, Monte Cristo did the same, and the rest followed their example. Villefort and Madame Danglars remained for a moment, as if rooted to their seats. They questioned each other with vague and stupid glances. Did you hear? Said Madame Danglars. Elizabeth de Risson, Marquise de Ganges, was one of the famous women of the court of Louis XIV. Where she was known as La Belle Provençale. She was the widow of the Marquise de Castellane when she married de Ganges, and having the misfortune to excite the enmity of her new brothers-in-law, was forced by them to take poison, and they finished her off with pistol and dagger. Ed. We must go, replied Villefort, offering his arm. The others, attracted by curiosity, were already scattered in different parts of the house, for they thought the visit would not be limited to the one room, and that, at the same time, they would obtain a view of the rest of the building, of which Monte Cristo had created a palace. Each one went out by the open doors. Monte Cristo waited for the two who remained, then, when they had passed, he brought up the rear, and on his face was a smile, which, if they could have understood it, would have alarmed them much more than a visit to the room they were about to enter. They began by walking through the apartments, many of which were fitted up in the Eastern style, with cushions and divans instead of beds, and pipes instead of furniture. The drawing rooms were decorated with the rarest pictures by the old masters, the boudoirs hung with draperies from China, of fanciful colors, fantastic design, and wonderful texture. At length they arrived at the famous room. There was nothing particular about it, excepting that, although daylight had disappeared, it was not lighted, and everything in it was old-fashioned, while the rest of the rooms had been redecorated. These two causes were enough to give it a gloomy aspect. "Oh!" cried Madame de Villefort, "it is really frightful." Madame Danglars tried to utter a few words, but was not heard. Many observations were made, the import of which was a unanimous opinion that there was something sinister about the room. "Is it not so?" asked Monte Cristo. "Look at that large clumsy bed, hung with such gloomy, blood-colored drapery. And those two crayon portraits, that have faded from the dampness, do they not seem to say, with their pale lips and staring eyes, 'We have seen'?" Villefort became livid. Madame Danglars fell into a long seat placed near the chimney. "Oh," said Madame de Villefort, smiling, "are you courageous enough to sit down upon the very seat perhaps upon which the crime was committed?" Madame Danglars rose suddenly. "And then," said Monte Cristo, "this is not all." "What is there more?" said Debray, who had not failed to notice the agitation of Madame Danglars. "Ah, what else is there?" said Danglars, "for, at present, I cannot say that I have seen anything extraordinary. What do you say, M. Cavalcanti?" "Ah," said he, "we have at Pisa, Ugolino's tower, at Ferrara, Tasso's prison, at Rimini, the room of Francesca and Paolo." "Yes, but you have not this little staircase," said Monte Cristo, opening a door concealed by the drapery. "Look at it, and tell me what you think of it." "What a wicked-looking, crooked staircase," said Chateau Renaud with a smile. "I do not know whether the wine of Chios produces melancholy, but certainly everything appears to me black in this house," said Debray. Ever since Valentine's dowry had been mentioned, Morel had been silent and sad. Can you imagine, said Monte Cristo, some Othello or Abbé de Ganges, one stormy, dark night, descending these stairs step by step, carrying a load, which he wishes to hide from the sight of man, if not from God? Madame Danglars half fainted on the arm of Villefort, who was obliged to support himself against the wall. Ah, madame, cried Debray, what is the matter with you? How pale you look!
It is very evident what is the matter with her, said Madame de Villefort. De Monte Cristo is relating horrible stories to us, doubtless intending to frighten us to death.
Yes, said Villefort, really, Count, you frighten the ladies. What is the matter? Asked Debray, in a whisper, of Madame Danglars. Nothing, she replied with a violent effort. I want air, that is all. Will you come into the garden? Said Debray, advancing towards the back staircase. No, no, she answered, I would rather remain here.